Hey guys, it's Ollie from the UtdXclusive, and today I'm joined with Rich, who's senior writer for Manchester United at MEN, and we're going to be talking about all the latest news. We're just going to ask some questions for the upcoming season and just get a whole, run around of everything related to Manchester United this season. So first of all, Rich, thank you for coming on. We need to ask you the big question: how does it feel, Jadon Sancho finally here? It's been so long. We've been waiting a year and a half almost for it. It's great to see, right?
Yeah, it's great to see. And when that announcement finally came through on the 1st of July, I think many fans were almost scratching their eyes because it's been one that's been in the pipeline for so long. And United wanted to sign Sancho when he left Man City back in 2017. So, this predates Solskjaer as well. It's 4 years United have chased Jadon Sancho. They were never going to get him when he left City. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has always been keen to add him to his squad, and he's a player who, some fans might say he isn't the priority this summer. He's a bit of a bonus buy because Ahmad and Pelestri joined last summer. But to Solskjaer, he's still the perfect signing. He ticks every box of his philosophy. He's young, he's already world class.
Yeah.
If United get a decade out of him, what is 72.9 million? You're paying almost 7 million a year for a player who really could be like a sort of Ballon d'Or challenger if things go his way. He just brings something to the United team which no one else does. He's the proper out-and-out winger. Solskjaer loves nostalgia. Solskjaer loves to talk about what happened in his day at Old Trafford, and United are just born on fast wingers who like to do step overs, like to beat their man, like to put crosses into the box. I can't wait to see just how he fits into this United side. He played all across the front line, but it's on that right wing, putting balls into the box for Cavani. It's going to be a real improvement in United's attacking play. It's going to bring balance to that right-hand side. They've always been a bit iffy, a bit lopsided, a bit makeshift on the right wing. But now, Jadon Sancho is basically the first proper senior right winger they've signed since Wilfried Zaha. It's been that long. Mkhitaryan came in, had to play central. Juan Mata's played there a bit. Of course, Ahmad and Pelestri have been signed, but they're both so young that you can't really put them in that bracket. So, yeah, it's been so long overdue. And, being United's right winger used to be the most famous position in all of world football. And now it feels like they've got a player who's worthy of being it again.
100%. And speaking about, the whole thing around wingers, the classic Manchester United winger always has the number 7. Now, do you know anything about what potential numbers Jadon might be wearing at United? There is a bit of talk if he's going to wear the number 7. And Cavani's obviously got it at the moment, but it'd be nice to see a proper Manchester United winger with a lot of potential, a lot of fluidity with the number 7, right?
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. And of course, it'd be a bit harsh on Cavani, but he's done so well to alleviate that curse. We've been talking so long about who's going to be the number 7 to finally replace Ronaldo. We've had Valencia, we've had Memphis, we've had Owen, we've had Di Maria. It's so good to see what Cavani did last season. But yeah, I think I'm a sucker for numbers being in the right sort of positions. It was particularly because United have been so defined that your right back should be number 2, your left winger should be 11, midfielder should be 18s and 16s. You've got a striker who's number 9, and then on the right you've got your number 7. So I think it would make a lot of sense, and I think as well from a marketing point of view, it would make a lot of sense to have Sancho 7 on the back of the shirts next season. Of course, we've seen similar things in the past when Ronaldo went to Real Madrid to get to wear number 9 and then moved to 7. Sancho's here for the long run. I don't think it's going to bother him too much if he doesn't get the number 7 shirt. I think it's a long-term goal of his to do so. So, even if he wasn't to get it next season, I wouldn't panic too much about what might happen. But I do think that depending on who leaves, etc., this summer, some squad numbers might change. And, Sancho number 7 makes a lot of sense to you and I and to everyone listening, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, United definitely love to market. And one player that really markets their number 2 is Paul Pogba, number 6. Obviously, he is, one of the best midfielders in the world at the moment, and especially in the Euros. I mean, obviously they've been knocked out by Switzerland, but he pretty much carried France. It's fair to say in that Euros, he was great. He was scoring goals, wonder goals. He was, he looks his best for France every tournament, and he wasn't any shy of that again. And obviously, he's only got another year on his contract at the moment. And the big question is, will Paul Pogba be signing a new deal, or is he going to Real Madrid? Is he going to PSG? Like, what's the news on that? Do you know anything?
Well, it's an easy question to answer, isn't it? I wish I could give you too much insight. But yeah, I mean, from United's point of view, Paul Pogba's basically had the perfect summer. He's gone away to France, like you said, he's been their best player. Okay, they've been knocked out early, but if France had gone to the semi-finals or even the finals, Pogba would have got player of the tournament. He's been playing so much better than anyone else, not just in that French team, but just in the whole European Championship. So for United, that's perfect because it means Pogba comes back now, 2 weeks extra rest. And on the other hand, he sent a transfer reminder because if you looked maybe coming into the summer, yeah, Pogba's been playing really good for United, particularly on the left wing. But was he the most exciting midfielder in the world? I don't think he really had that hype around him. I think it died down a bit. The European Championship has reminded everyone of what a fully fit, fully functioning Paul Pogba can do. On this day,
100%.
people can't get close to him, and he really is in that bracket, along with sort of De Bruyne of players who just can influence a team from midfield. So I think in terms of his transfer value, it's a reminder to the likes of PSG and Real Madrid, two teams who pride themselves on having the best players in world football. So do United.
Yeah.
But there's maybe more pressing issues for them still this summer. Again, the issue is who is actually going to be able to afford Pogba this summer, because you look at PSG, they've gone for a couple of free agents. They're still, they've signed Neymar to a new long deal. They want to get Mbappe onto a long-term contract as well. Real Madrid, they're riddled with debt. Barcelona having to pick up freebies because they haven't got the money either. So in terms of this summer, I think from United's point of view, it would still maybe make sense to cash in on him if he's not going to sign this new deal. But who will be able to afford him, I don't quite know. And in terms of the contract, it's almost a non-story because, of course, United want to keep him on a deal. It's Paul Pogba, but United want him to stay because it's Paul Pogba, as we've seen in the Euros. He's one of the best players in Europe still, so why would you want to keep him? But I guess the issue is, how do you convince him to do so? Because he's already spent so long back at the club, and if you compare his trophy cabinet to some of his French teammates, it's still impressive. He's got a World Cup, but in terms of club titles, there's probably not as much or as many as he'd like to. He'd love to win European honours as well. Of course, deals for players like Jadon Sancho are going to make his task maybe that little bit easier, but in terms of a new contract, there's nothing imminent which is going to happen. United want to keep him, but the power is very much with Paul Pogba and Mino Raiola, which has always sort of been an issue for United anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's fair to say as well, United don't want to let him go for too cheap either. And it just seems like one of those things is like, no one's going to buy him, especially with the current situation of like the corona, the pandemic, everything. The clubs are struggling for money, and it's like, who can afford to spend 60, 70 million for Paul Pogba when they could get him for free next season?
Yeah, and like you said there becomes a point where it's not just sell Pogba at all costs, because I don't know the fees exactly, but I think from United's point of view, you'd rather keep Paul Pogba and lose him for nothing next summer than sell him for 40 million this summer, because having Paul Pogba, even if it's one last season as a swan song, that could be the difference between winning the league and not. Like, it's 100%. Worth keeping him around at all costs from United, I think. Even if his long-term future isn't at the club anymore, I think it's in their interests to try and have that final farewell, have that a happy divorce from the club, really. If Pogba can get United firing and play that sort of free role he has for France, and United win the league title, I don't think there'll be too many sort of tears when he does leave, because it'll be on good terms. Of course, not getting a fee will be bad business for the club, and they won't want to do that. But I think Solskjaer, he's coming to the end of this sort of 3-year cycle that he's had initially at United. He has to have more progress and more. He has to be in a title race next season. So I don't see how selling Paul Pogba or getting rid of him this summer would help in any way at all.
Yeah, I mean, the only way you could really say it would be beneficial is if we replaced him. And I've heard little links to Camavinga and Declan Rice has been quite a link since like mid-season. But do you think any of that is true? Do you reckon United are out for a CDM, or is that a position that with Donny van der Beek coming, I know he's not really a CDM, but they've been heavily buying midfielders like the last few years with Bruno and Van den Beek. So do you reckon that's a position they're going to go for again this summer, or is that something that they're not prioritising as much?
It's a position they'd like to strengthen, but like I said, I don't think it's a priority. Declan Rice, they're admirers of, but he's rejected 2 contract offers at West Ham. You know, he does want to look elsewhere, but West Ham are adamant he'll cost over £100 million, which is just not going to happen. You know, United have never spent more than 150 million ever on permanent additions in a single summer window. Ever. They never spent over 150 million. They might just edge that this summer, but when you've already spent 72.9 on Sancho, you're looking to get defenders in as well. It's a bonus buy, it's a luxury, which I just don't think United can afford. I personally think that defensive midfield is a bigger priority than right wing this summer, from my point of view, but I think it could be one which is overlooked. You don't want to just buy someone for buying's sake either. You need to get someone in who can have that sort of seismic change. And that's my one kind of doubt over Camavinga. I think he's got the ceiling of being a world-class player. But if Camavinga hypothetically came to United this summer, I couldn't see him starting every game next season because Solskjaer is quite reluctant to use youth players in that way. I think Camavinga being dropped into that United midfield as the only CDM would be really unfair on him. I think he still needs a bit of progress. Personally, from my point of view, the dream signing would be NDD at Leicester. I think the fact they've missed out on Champions League football, they do have that financial power themselves, but I think there could be some movement there. Surely if they're waiting for a bid, and he's got the experience, he's such a good ball winner. Okay, he's not the best at sort of distributing the play, and he gives the ball away quite a bit, has some errors in him, but I think he would bring so much more stability to United in a defensive sort of aspect. He'd be that anchor to give Paul Pogba the freedom. But as you said then, the issue with midfield is there's so much uncertainty about those already at the club. You've got Paul Pogba, no one knows what's going to happen with him long term. You've got Donny van de Beek, who, his camp and his sort of reps are saying there very much is a future for him at United. I personally see that in more of a box-to-box role. I think ideally, if Pogba went, you'd have Bruno as the cam, you'd have Van der Beek and a specialist defensive midfielder behind him. You've got James Garner, who had a great season at Nottingham Forest. He's attracting attention from the likes of Norwich and Rangers ahead of next season. He's a player who United need to give a chance to in pre-season. I don't think he's ready for sort of a regular role in the first team, but he's, if you then bought another young centre defensive midfielder, what does that say for Garner's future? You need to give him a proper evaluation first. McTominay and Fred, as an axis, they're very safe, limited. You know what you want to get from the McFred duo, don't you? But you also know what you're not going to get. Solskjaer says that McTominay's better going forward. He scored 7 goals last season. For Scotland, he plays at centre-back at times. So you need to sort of pinpoint what McTominay's role is. And then, of course, you've got Fred, who, if you're bringing in another defensive midfielder, you almost say that someone from Van der Beek, McTominay, Fred would have to go because it wouldn't be enough places to give all those players game time. So in terms of defensive midfield, it's a position that I do want to strengthen eventually, but this summer I just can't see them buying a proper recognised name because all the players which would make an immediate difference would cost a hell of a lot. So it could be one way not to go for a wild card signing, take a bit of a gamble on someone who, if it doesn't pay off, it doesn't matter too much. But I do think centre back is the priority now after getting Sancho. So that's where most of the funds will go.
Yeah, and do you reckon, speaking about that, centre back's probably going to be the next position United are actually targeting? Do you reckon? There's obviously been a lot of links with Varane, and that's looking a lot more promising now. I've seen some news that Real Madrid are also interested in getting Pau Torres, which, it kind of does this domino effect where Pau Torres goes to Madrid and Varane is looking very likely to leave. PSG look like they're going to get Ramos, so it all kind of like works in our favour. Yeah,
it makes sense. And United have always wanted Varane for a decade now or so. He's been a player who they wanted when he was leaving Lens originally. Ed Woodward is an admirer of him. I know he's outgoing himself. United have always sort of classified Varane in that world-class bracket, and I don't think there's any fans who would dispute that. He's a player who would bring an immediate lift to United. You might not get the longevity out of him. In terms of being a partner for Maguire, I think they're quite similar, which is in one way very good, but in some ways you'd be like, we need someone who's a bit more agile, a bit more mobile, someone who's left-footed to play alongside Maguire and complement him, which I think is where Pau Torres' interest has come from. And, the likes of Koundé and Sven Botman, they're players who you'd say maybe are better as a partner for Maguire, but in terms of an individual, there's no one available this summer who's better than Varane. There is progress happening over a potential move for Varane. The issue again is that Real Madrid, although they know that they could lose him for free next summer, they are quite stubborn with the sort of fee they're asking for in terms of Varane. There's going to need to be compromise there somewhere down the line. But Varane's wages as well, he'd be quite an expensive outlay. Part of the reason why he's leaving Real Madrid is because he's not happy with the contract he's been offered there. They are saying he could be the new captain with Ramos leaving, and they're happy to give him a wage increase, but maybe not enough of what he wants. So Varane is doable. You can get him this summer. It's just a case of finding that compromise of Real Madrid, paying what you think is an affordable wage. United have, in the last few years, they've made a real decision to go away from that sort of Van Gaal, Mourinho vibe where they were buying. I'm not classifying Varane as like a journeyman, but there was lots of players who were coming in on really high wages when they're already quite old, quite hard to shift. Varane is an exception because he's got World Cup, he's got I think 4 or 5 Champions Leagues to his name as well. He is a different sort of kettle of fish, but there still has to be sensible negotiations. And United have shown that with Sancho. It's a real positive. They waited a year. They've effectively got Sancho for £35 million less than Dortmund were originally asking. For Varane, there's definitely mitigation. There's definitely scope for a deal. I think, from United's point of view, they are confident they could get Varane this summer. We've wrote in the Manchester News today, we're recording this on the 1st of July, that United are even looking at possibly getting 2 defenders this summer, not just one. They're looking at maybe getting someone like Varane, someone a bit less senior that can perhaps be moulded into a long-term defensive sort of stronghold in that defence, who can learn off Maguire, who can learn off Varane. Again, I do think that they need someone who's a bit quicker, someone who can complement either of those two if they're playing. But, I don't think any United fans will be complaining. They'll find fault if you've got a spine of Maguire and Varane next season.
Yeah, that would be quality. And obviously, you mentioned that that you wrote in the MEN today that there could be 2 defenders coming in, and then you've got to start questioning who's going to go out. And in general, do you just have any news on the potential players that will be leaving Manchester United this season? There's obviously been a lot of talk near the end of the season about the goalkeeper debate. Was De Gea going? Is Dean Henderson going to be the main man? But then you've got some deadwood players such as Phil Jones. You wouldn't really class Lingard as that, but he's one player that is on a high right now. You could get a good price for him, and need to get rid of him. There's Juan Mata, who's I think only got another year on his contract, and there's quite a lot of players that United could get rid of. So, is there any news on that?
It's always the mitigation as well. And when we write about players United could sign this summer, the other caveat is to buy players, you've got to sell players. And, in an ideal world, United would buy, like we said, maybe defensive midfielder, but you can only function for that if you have some serious player sales. Lingard is the player who's got the highest market sort of rate this summer. United still going to hold out for a hefty fee for him because he had such a productive second half of the season with West Ham, earned his England recall. He's unlucky not to be part of the Euro squad at the moment. So Jesse Lingard is a player who, I think comes a time where United just have to sort of bite the bullet and say, we just got to sell him. Yes, he'd be a nice little luxury to have on the bench and bring on at times, but it's not what he needs. It's not what United need. And both parties need just a resolution to that this summer. So I think Jesse Lingard is one who can go. Juan Mata is confident of joining. He's got that option of an extra year in his contract, which United could trigger, but I think they want to offer him another short-term contract on a lesser wage, which makes sense. Mata wants to stay, so I wouldn't be surprised to see something announced on him. You've got the likes, like we said before, of Garner, you've got Mengi, you've got Axel Tuanzebe, who are all being earmarked for loans. You've got lots of youth players as well, the likes of Anthony Elanga, who could go out on loan. Hannibal maybe could go out on loan. I don't really see it happening too much. It has to be to a league where he can really impose himself properly. In terms of other departures, like you said, the goalkeeping situation is a really interesting one because all last season, all we wrote was by the end of the season, we need to know who the number 1 is. There still isn't really too much clarity on that. But what we've been told at the MEN is that Dean Henderson has been told that he very much is the number one at the moment, and Dean Henderson is approaching next season thinking he's going to be the number one. But I'm not sure De Gea has been told that he's not the number one. So,
Right.
Solskjaer has to make these ruthless decisions on who stays and who goes. It's really hard to actually see him do any of that. Dean Henderson, I'm very much of the belief that De Gea is I still think De Gea is the better goalkeeper, but he's on the way down. Dean Henderson on the way up. They're going to cross paths very soon. And when De Gea came to United, he had lots of errors in him, but he was given that faith and given that time. Anders Lindegaard came in for a bit, but he couldn't dislodge him permanently. And De Gea went on to brighter and better things, and eventually became the best goalkeeper in the world. I think Dean Henderson just needs that time and needs that faith. I think from my personal point of view, like I said, I think De Gea is just about ahead of him still at the moment in terms of quality. But I think you can't. It's just you can't continue that situation. So from my personal point of view, I think De Gea is the one who will have to go. But then again, where does he go? Because Donnarumma has just gone to PSG. I don't see any other teams really with a need for a goalkeeper who could afford someone like De Gea, particularly.
There were some links of him going to Roma and joining Mourinho, but I'm not too sure what you reckon on that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like Rui Patricio from Wolves might be going to Roma.
Right,
as well.
I've seen that.
I think as soon as Mourinho took over at Roma, every single United player was linked to the move there. So it's no surprise really. And stranger things have happened, but I'm not sure I can see it totally. And I think from De Gea's point of view, no disrespect to Roma, but I think he'd be aiming a bit higher than that because he still firmly believes that he is one of the top goalkeepers in the world, which you've got to have that sort of confidence and inner belief. And, I think he has proven still in those brief moments, in terms of reflex saves, etc. He still is pretty much unrivaled at times. He really does. There's still 2 or 3 games a season where De Gea will, get those points that otherwise wouldn't have been there. And he's still a vital member of the first team squad, very popular member of the squad as well. So it's just a difficult one. That's Solskjaer's problem, really. He is too nice at times. I think he needs to be more ruthless. You've got the likes of Diogo Dalot. AC Milan have made an offer to take him on loan and then buy him at the end of that. But United have told him to come back for pre-season because they're not confident, or maybe not as confident of getting Kieran Trippier because there's not been any real movement over that. Atletico Madrid want a much higher fee than United are prepared to pay. You've got players like Andres Pereira who didn't really wow in his time at Lazio, but with a new manager coming in, there's a belief that he could have a second bite of the cherry out there. But like you said, there's still so many players in the United team who you just don't really know what their long-term purpose is. And you can have a few of them. You need squad players. It's really important to have that squad harmony and to have that balance and to have players who are happy to play in the League Cup matches, happy to play in some of the dead rubber Champions League group stage ties, etc. Maybe even play against some of the smaller teams in the Premier League. You've got to have that correct balance. But United is still a squad which is heavily bloated. And the issue is, if United do want to strengthen all their positions this summer, they're going to have to sell some of those players.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously talking about how United are going to set up for next season, there's been some talks how, obviously Jadon Sancho coming in, it gives a lot more freedom for United to switch up the way they play and how they play. We saw Paul Pogba playing on the left a lot last season in sort of a 4-2-3-1 where it was a bit more central base, and Paul had that space on the wideness. But obviously, obviously it's going to be Marcus Rashford most likely playing on the left. But then you've got Martial. You've got a lot more pace now. You've got Sancho who can play all 3 of those positions in the centre, on the wings. So what I'm asking you is, do you reckon United will set up as a 4-3-3, or are they going to try and change up? Like, what's Ollie thinking coming up to the season?
It's a really interesting one, and I think it does. I think, like I said, we'll see in pre-season just what type of vibe he wants to go for. It's interesting the Sancho arrival because United's attack, the right wing's stronger, but it's still a bit imbalanced because you've got an inverted winger on the left, you've got an out-and-out winger on the right. So it's going to be asking a lot of Luke Shaw to do the overlaps and to get forward as well and offer width on the left-hand side, which you don't get on the right-hand side. I know Wan-Bissaka's improving going forward, but he's not an offensive fullback. He's really good at what he does in the defensive aspect. That's why United wanted someone like Trippier this summer. It's going to be difficult because they want to sort of get a right back in relatively cheap who can come in, supplement the squad, and add that sort of attacking alternative on the right. I don't know who's going to be affordable to do that. So yeah, in terms of the actual setup, the issue is that Pogba and Bruno both almost want to occupy that same area of the pitch, and there's been some suggestion United could go for that sort of double attacking axis that Pep Guardiola uses at City, where he has Fernandinho holding, and you have maybe De Bruyne or Bernardo or Foden playing in those advanced midfield roles. I can't see that happening for United. They don't have the defensive midfield to cater for it, to anchor that attacking ability. I think Paul Pogba, his best position for United is on the left, because he sees so much more of the ball. He can dictate the tempo of the game at his own speed. But like you said, Rashford is so much an Ollie favourite that I just can't see a fully fit Rashford being dislodged ever from the United lineup, really, no matter what he does. And his form towards the end of last season was pretty woeful, and that's because he's been tackling injury. It's no personal criticism of him as a footballer.
Yeah.
But I still think that the way Solskjaer manages some of the individual players is really bizarre. Yes, I understand every team has that core of players who they are reliant on more than others, but you've got to give them a rest. You've got to give them time and to mix things up a bit. So I still, like you said, think there'll be that three across the top. Midfield, it's so hard to tell with Solskjaer. I still think that he does quite like to play it safe, and you wouldn't be surprised if on the opening day of the season against Leeds it was that McTominay-Fred axis again, because that's safe for big games and it gives him that protection. But I think a lot of it does rely on Paul Pogba's future. What does he want to do? Where does he want to go? He said how much more he enjoys playing with attacking freedom. Giving him such a role, that could be a key to keeping him at the club, keeping him happy. And if you say to Pogba, we'll let you play as an attacking mid and do whatever you want, you can float about at your own pace, then that might be something that convinces them to stay at United. But I just don't think it's a luxury they can afford. I think tactically next season, they weren't too far off. There are signs there, and if you cut out some of the really sloppy results, United would be closer to Man City in the title race. You think about Everton draw, you think of losing to Sheffield United, needless drop points. You think of all the dull 0-0 games against your top six rivals.
Yeah.
So I think tactically, there probably isn't too much more that needs to be changed. I think that in pre-season they'll definitely look at it. But if you just add better players, that's going to bring an improvement in quality anyway. So I think
100%,
tactically, United don't need to worry too much. They've got that 3-5-2 they like to play. They can drop back into that. Sancho will fit fine into that as well, because he can play in the central roles if he needs to. You've still got two wing backs who can do the job, and I wouldn't I'm not anticipating any sort of drastic tactical changes next season. I think it'll be quite similar to what we've seen over the last year, but the mitigation is United will be fitter, they'll be playing less games, and they'll have better players. So there should be an improvement there.
Yeah, and obviously talking about pre-season, there's also a lot of youth. United have always been year in, year out. They've always been creating a lot of youth and a lot of players that could be the future of football. And there's players like Hannibal, there's Ahmad, obviously, there's Pellistri. That's just to name a few. Do you reckon any of these names, or do you know any names that will be going on pre-season and that are potentially in the plans of Ollie's next season, for cup games and stuff like that? Like, are they going to start getting moulded into the first team? Any news on that?
It's an interesting one. I think Shoretire, Hannibal, and Elanga. I think maybe one or two of them will stay around. Elanga said he's open to a loan move. I think for him, particularly because he's broken into the Sweden youth team, I think a loan move would suit him well. I think he's got maybe more of the physicality to cope with a loan move at this stage. Shoretire will get a chance in pre-season, and I think he's a player who could be on the periphery next season. I think maybe sticking in the under-23s and then coming in for those sort of League Cup games might be the best next step for him. Hannibal is an interesting one. There's not really been a firm decision. I've spoken to people at the club who say, he's still in the plans to have that promotion, and he would have played for the first team much earlier in the year had he not had a shoulder injury in the youth team. I think it was against Arsenal that he did a shoulder, and he was out for a while. He would have played much earlier for the first team rather than that cameo against Wolves on the final day. So he's one who's very much in Solskjaer's reckoning. Who else is there? I think an interesting one. I don't want to put too much pressure on him, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Hugel made his debut in a
Yeah,
Carabao Cup game or something if he continues this form. He's only 17, he's still very, very young, but he's a proper number 9. Solskjaer loves players like that. He loves a proper focal point up front. Joe Hugel, I watched him so many times with the 23s last season. And his movement off the ball is intelligent. He scores some gritty goals just because he's in a 6-yard box, reads the play really well. And if this summer United don't buy a striker, which is looking quite unlikely because the two strikers they like the most are Kane and Haaland. They won't be able to afford either of them if you just
yeah,
bought Sancho and you get perhaps Varane in. There's just not the funds to do so. So in a weird way, if United don't get a striker, it's someone like Joe Hugel could really prosper because Edson Cavani is the only sort of proper number 9. You've got Greenwood who can play through the middle. That's a long-term goal, but he's still not quite up to speed. He plays far better on the right wing, I think, than through the middle. He's still not really. He can't do it when you're playing against a low block team because he's got his back to goal and to hold the ball up. It just doesn't work. But
yeah,
Joe Hugel, I think, given his height, he's lanky and he is a physical presence. Yes, he's very slight and he needs to bulk up if he ever wants to be a proper Premier League striker. Never mind make it in the Football League or whatever. And he's got some attributes which I think are interesting. Of course, the issue there is most of these sort of games where you can play youngsters come at the start of the season.
yeah,
So a player needs to be quite far down the development cycle to ever get minutes in those matches. Whereas United youngsters tend to sort of hit their stride towards the tail end of the season when the games matter more, so they don't get to play as much as you'd like to see them. And the other thing with Solskjaer is that you might have someone like Hugel banging in 20, 30 goals for the youth team, but as we saw against the likes of sort of Luton and Real Sociedad last season, even in these dead rubber games, he likes to go strong because there's so much pressure on Solskjaer to actually win a trophy now at United. He can't really take too many risks.
yeah,
Elsewhere in the youth team, there's a few of them who are going to go out on loan. Duchamp Bernard, Matej Kovar, Dylan Leather, Ethan Galbraith. I'm told they're all ready for loan moves, really. I'm quite impressed last season watching the fullbacks, Mark Gerardo and Alvaro Fernandez. I don't think either of them are near the sort of senior setup, but they both did really well in their debut seasons for the under-23s. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. But if I had to say the players most likely to feature in pre-season, I'd still say Shoretira and Hannibal will be quite central to those plans because Solskjaer just loves attacking players. And I do expect Garner to get a chance in the first couple of games, but I still think a loan move probably makes the most sense for him as the next step.
yeah. Well, it'll be exciting to see pre-season, and obviously Jadon Sancho is going to be there. Hopefully more signings. But one thing about pre-season is, do we still, is Marcus Rashford going to have a rest? Obviously, he's had that Euros, and he's had some problems with his shoulder and his back, if I believe. And there's been a lot of problems in near the end of the season. You could really see it really in his performances that the fatigue was really getting to him. And there's been some talk of surgeries and whatnot and therapies. Do you think Marcus Rashford will take upon that, or is that something that's maybe a bit too late now? And especially with England's success in the Euros so far, it's kind of really tighten it up. It's what's he going to do? Is he going to miss a bit of start of season to focus on himself? Do you know anything about that at all?
I don't have too much insight on Rashford's decision. I was thinking at the moment, but Solskjaer's point of view, he probably wanted England to get knocked out in the group stages if possible to have some of his key players rested, like you said, even the likes of Luke Shaw, who isn't going to be particularly rested before the new season. Harry Maguire, who he plays whenever they can afford to play him, and the fact that he's back in contention is so crucial for England. It's positive for Maguire, maybe not a positive for United. Rashford as well, the fact Sancho, one of his best mates, is arriving, there might just be that over eagerness to be like, we need to make the most of this, start playing. But from my personal point of view, I think the short-term loss of having surgery would be a long-term gain for Rashford because he has been suffering for so long. And it's the second consecutive season where he's had injury layoffs. It was January 2020 where he got I think it was December actually when he got an injury. That's the reason that Sandy Garland on loan because Rashford wasn't available. They only had Martial through the middle as a senior attacking option. So Rashford, he's really unfortunate, and I do think there is that mitigation you've got to consider with him. He was really poor towards the end of last season. The Europa League final was an abject performance. I know not many players did play well in the final. I don't get how Rashford stayed on for the duration when Greenwood was
Yeah,
playing so much better. I think Greenwood has arguably been the best striker this calendar year for United, probably the best forward. I know Cavani did hit his stride as well, but I think Greenwood just doesn't get the credit at times that he deserves for the role he plays
yeah,
at such a young age. We take him for granted just how young he is. It's
yeah.
mad. It is
It's
mad.
crazy, honestly. I agree
But
with you
then,
on that because there's
yeah,
a lot of talk about a lot of players at the moment. You know, the young players, the English generation players, and people like Sancho and Foden. They're absolutely amazing talents. But the thing people don't realize is they've got a couple of years on Mason, and especially on that high level as well. Like even Foden, he was playing in the City team from like 1918, and Mason Greenwood's only 19 at the moment. So it's like in 2, 3 years' time, the ceiling is the limit, honestly, with Mason, and you really do expect him to reach that level.
yeah. You do take him for granted. He's just recognised as a Premier League striker now, and he's only
Yeah,
played 2 seasons in senior football. One of them, he was still getting to terms with senior football. I was on that pre-season tour in Australia when he got his chance properly, and it was really exciting to watch him emerge as a 17-year-old. And
yeah,
he had that first season where he played a lot. He really hit stride towards the end. United had that front three of Rashford, Martial, Greenwood, all of them fluid front line interchanging. It was a real joy to watch that. And I
yeah,
think there's some fans who are hoping that can come back at some stage. And I think it could, particularly now that maybe you swap out Sancho for Martial and you've got a front three of Rashford, Greenwood, and Sancho at times. That's exciting. And the movement would be terrorising the defences that they play against. But yeah, Greenwood is a player who I think is massively underrated. Just doesn't get the love he
yeah,
deserves because
100%.
he's doing it week in, week out. He's a
I
key
think he's
player
like
for,
a victim of his own success because he peaked
yeah,
so high quickly. It's like it was hard for him to keep up that sort of performance at Manchester United at that age. So it's kind of, I'm not taking anything away from him, but he's obviously maybe not performing to the wow and everything, and like got all the attention to him as he did like a year ago. But any United fan will know that the quality is still there. It's still Mason
yeah,
Greenwood, and it's like it's just exciting to see, honestly.
yeah. And if, from my point of view, if you had to give one of United's forward line a one-on-one to win the match, I'd back Greenwood over anyone else. To
Yeah,
be honest, he's so cool, so clinical. When he was coming through the youth team, we carried on hearing that he's so good with both feet. I think he is very much left-footed rather than right-footed. You know what he likes to do. He likes to cut in and calmly
yeah,
finish
yeah.
from the
The
inside. Loves
trademark.
beating the keeper at his near post. He is so cool in front of goal. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think he doesn't get quite the credit he deserves. But he's such another exciting player, and it's going to be interesting to see that playing time next season with Sancho arriving on the right wing. It's really interesting one to see what Ole does with all that.
yeah, 100%. And obviously, with Jadon Sancho coming in, it's kind of felt like the last 6 months, obviously, United did announce that, Ed Woodward's leaving and Murtough's coming in and Darren Fletcher came in, and there's a whole like revamp behind the scenes. Do you reckon that's already had an effect on this Jadon Sancho deal? Because obviously, it has took a while, but pretty much since this whole Sancho news came about again this season, it's gone quite quick, and in a times where the Euros are on as well, so it's a bit more trickier. Normally, the classic United like 2, 3 years ago, it would have took a lot longer, and there would have been a lot more uh, up and down with it. But it kind of went smooth, and there's already links with new players and new signings, and it just seems like there's a bit more positivity, but there's a bit more directness with United's approach to the transfer window. And do you reckon that's had an impact already? With Ed Woodward leaving, or was Ed Woodward still part of this? Is just something new, like, and as well with Glazers, obviously they had a lot of stick with the Super League and all that protest going on and everything. To put a lot of pressure on them as well. Is it all like what's the situation here? Is any of that, affecting this? Like, don't know anything about
I think from my personal point of view, I mean, on Ed Woodward, we were told when the Super League sort of drama unfolded, and obviously it came that he was going to leave United. We were always told that would be at the end of the calendar year. So, I know he's maybe taking steps back, and he's not the face of the club as much as he was before, but, he's still been involved behind the scenes. And, from a commercial point of view, Woodward's done his job he was never, should probably never been tasked with the transfers as much as he was done, and he shouldn't really have ever been the face of United's transfer strategy. Because whether you like it or not, United as a brand have grown under Woodward. I know people saying Glazer sympathiser, but that's just a fact. They have done. In terms of the summer, it is seismic. It's huge for United. I always will judge his transfer window at the end, because so much could happen yet that I don't want to get too carried away and give United credit or be too harsh on them, because the proof will be in the pudding, really, won't it? I mean, like you said, the last couple of summers, I think definitely the first two under Solskjaer, of course, last season was affected by the pandemic, but United have seemed to really drag out obvious deals throughout the summer. You think of the Maguire one, all summer United were saying, we're only paying this, and then they end up paying Leicester's valuation right at the end of the deadline. They only seem to ever work on one transfer at a time. Like you said, Sancho's done and already moving on to another, which is a sign of encouragement. I think what we're seeing now, though, is a culmination of all the hard work that's gone in behind the scenes over the last few years. United's sort of rejuvenation and overhaul hasn't just been overnight. It hasn't just been Mertens been appointed as sort of football director and that's it, a whole new era starts from there. These changes have been happening behind the scenes for a long time, and they almost use sort of the youth team as their guinea pig. And last summer United had the best recruitment of any youth team in world football. They were almost flawless. The additions they were getting in, they signed a player from Barcelona, one from Real Madrid, one from Atletico Madrid. They got Hugo in, they got McNeil in. It was pretty flawless last summer at youth level. This summer, though, it is huge, obviously, because it's John Murtaugh's first one involved in a sort of recognised role. But United fans know who he is now. No one really knew who he was start of the year, which which is fair enough, because he was sort of a hidden face in the background. But now, there is pressure on United to get things right. And it's a fantastic start. James Sancho is a brilliant addition, but he still is a bit of a bonus buy, a bit of a luxury, because they did buy 2 right wingers last summer. So the real test now is getting a centre back. They want 2 centre backs, and then what can you get on top of that? So I am going to give you a boring answer and say I'll judge it at the end of the summer, but the foundations are there for a very successful summer, and it would take some doing for another team to beat United's transfer business this summer if United really do fulfil all their ambitions.
Yeah, well, obviously we need to, because City, they're always building, and there's already links with them with Kane and Grealish and whatnot. So United definitely need to take that upon themselves and try and build onto that, and fight them for the title next season, because that's what every fan is expecting, to be fair, of Solskjaer. I feel like we've answered all the questions here. It's been great to talk to you. You've given us some beautiful answers and beautiful insight into the club, and it's a pleasure, obviously. So we really appreciate that here at UtdXclusive. Thank you for taking your time to talk to us, and hopefully United, they can build on, and hopefully this time next season we'll be smiling even more than we are today with the Sancho news, with a potential trophy, and just more positivity.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to help out. I know sort of these fan accounts and stuff, and how much hard work goes in behind the scenes and trying to stay on the ball all the time and stuff. So I'm very happy to help and keep up the good work, really. Let's hope United give you your reward on the pitch. But it's been tough last season. Hopefully the fans will be back. Hopefully they'll have some new stars to cheer on as well. And it's pre-season. You can either be really optimistic or really negative. Let's just be optimistic. United are making all the moves. They've signed Jadon Sancho. What more could you want? There could be another addition as well around the corner. But 100%. Thank you very much for having me. And make sure you stick to UtdXclusive as well, where you can listen to this. For all the
we appreciate it. And obviously,
and
the MEN, obviously. And if you want to shout out any of your own, social pages and whatnot, be sure to check out Rich, obviously, though, because he knows all the United stuff, and he's high up there. So it's great. If you want more stuff like this, just on a daily regular, then this is your guy.
I've got to hire you as my agent, aren't I? Agent Ollie. Thank you very much as well. And cheers everyone for listening. As always, you can tweet your questions and stuff as well at me at Rich Fay. I'll try and answer as many as I can, but most of the time I check my phone after a shift at work, and sometimes it's just like You know, sometimes you cannot be bothered,
Yeah,
but I will
yeah, I
try and
get you.
answer them. And especially when it's like the same question over again, if you can like, almost think of an original question, whatever, I will always try and answer you. It's just when
Yeah,
every question is announced, Sancho, any Varane news, it's like, oh god.
yeah, I know what you mean. All right, well, yeah, we're gonna end it here. Thank you for talking to us again, and yeah, hopefully we get to do this again sometime soon. I'll just stop the recording now.